like masochists. Gluttons for punishment, huh? Man, you're going to take that much Cajun in one day. Awesome. Good for you. All right, here we go. Awesome. Well, like Mike, I'm Cajun, so I just wanted you to see me, but I can't stay still while I'm talking, especially about this kind of stuff, which is I'm so passionate about and excited about. Are you guys ready to get started? All right, awesome. Right before lunch, we're going to talk about this happy, joyful topic, depression and suicide. Yay! You're like, that's not funny, fella. Okay. All right. So anybody staying in the Marriott? After almost 35 years of formal education, stay in school, kids. After 35 years of formal education, I don't know what in the hell this is. I'm not kidding you. I felt like I had to turn in my man card. Because I had to call 0 to find out how to work the damn shower. Did anyone else struggle with that, or is it just Cajuns? Okay, good. Thank you. All right, let's get that out of the way, Marriott. So much for being an elite member. All right, here we go. All right, a little bit about me. My name's Roy Pettifies. We're here today. I'm so grateful you're here today on behalf of teenagers across North America, and I know that we got folks here from across several ponds, so welcome to you as well. But I'm so grateful on behalf of them that you're here, because when we're equipped and when we know what's going on, and it doesn't take much, as you'll see, to make what can potentially be a life-saving, physical life-saving, but certainly spiritually life-saving interventions and involvement in walking in the lives of young people. So I'm so pumped. My name, I thought I had a slide for that. I don't? Okay. My name's Roy Pettifies. I'll say a little bit more about me, but most importantly, these are my peeps. Clearly, this was not taken in South Louisiana. Right? We don't. Have anybody, this was in Calgary, Alberta. By the way, Catholic education is publicly funded up there. I love going up to Calgary. I'll be there in 3 weeks for the SPICE conference. Wonderful. Have any of you ever been up there and done the dog sledding stuff? You're like, seriously, dude, get to the content. All right, here's the dog sledding thing. We went in like late April. The ice is starting to get real thin. They're like, hey, Mr. Pedophile, this is the last day of the season, but don't worry, the ice is thin. The dogs will know where to go. You expect me to put my life and trust in the hands of a canine, but he did a good job. Look how worn out he is from pulling my big ass across the ice. Here we go. My wife, Mindy, AKA always right, me, always wrong. That's all you need to know about marriage right there, folks. It's right there. My oldest son, Max, who is no longer perfect because he's about to turn 14, so that's over. My youngest, Ben, who I'm going to just go ahead and call Purgatory. Any of your parents ever say, I pray for you that you get not worse, not better, but just like you? Well, I got him. There he is. 6 months old. Like, any of you ever got the chance to give the baby a bottle? Any of you got to? I got to do that. Very cool if you never get to do it. Very awesome. Both my boys get their genetics from me. They're large and in charge. They would look at a baby bottle and they'd be like, seriously? That's all you got, big boy? One? They would suck it so hard that it would literally whistle when it was coming out the low top, like just rocking it. So one night, I'm in my recliner watching one of the many Louisiana reality TV shows, for which I apologize. And I'm rocking Ben, and he's just jamming on the bottle. And at 6 months old, he'd drain that thing. It would scrunch up, and he'd like flick it up against the wall. So I'd line him up like shots on the side of the recliner. And he's jamming. I reach back, there's none. And so I keep rocking. However, I don't have a shirt on. Exactly. You got it. All of a sudden, I got to get up here to show you. All of a sudden, I feel this. It hurts. My brothers, écoutez-moi, as we say en français, listen to me. Whenever you hear a nursing mom use the word latch to describe that process, trust me when I tell you understatement. Think pit bull, much more accurate. And he's like, I get out of the recliner. I can't get him off without snapping his collarbone. And so finally I'm screaming, Mindy, get in here. She's not coming. And I'm trying to She walks into the room like she's like, oh my God. Let me go get my phone. I'll be right back. Yeah. And she did post it to YouTube, which is why we have each other's passwords for social media, so I could take it down. You know what? After working with young people, like so many of you, for the last 2 decades, I'm not that old, it took me having my own kids for me to realize something that we tell kids all the time. You are special. God created you unique and special. And I knew that, but man, we didn't do anything different with these 2 boys. And they couldn't be more different than day and night. They even look a lot alike, but they don't act alike. And you know what, my brothers and sisters, that's true for the young people in our care. But more and more and more, those young people, and even some of us in this room, don't really believe it. We go to Eucharist, we say we know we're blessed, but at the end of the day, most people, in my experience, really don't mostly think about their blessing. Most of us think about our brokenness. And that is so true for the young people who are in our care. And we get a uniquely privileged opportunity to enter into their lives very often when they are hurting. And we can make a real powerful difference, not just in what I'm going to call like psychological hygiene, but I'm talking about making a real positive difference ontologically, like in their soul. And that's what so many of them are hungering for today. So let's keep going. My name, Petafis, this is just my proof for you that I had hair once upon a time. It was a tradition in my family that you got the whole cake on your birthday. When it was your birthday, you got the whole cake, which explains probably some of the obesity incidences in my family, but we had the whole cake. My name definitely does not, it's pronounced Petafis, means grandson. A little more about me. I was a seminarian. I'm a recovering seminarian. I was in seminary for... That was good. No, I loved it. Seminary was great. I spent almost 6 years in a diocesan studying to be a diocesan priest, only to realize I loved seminary. It was like 5 of the best years of my life. And then I realized that that wasn't going to be the next 50 years of my life. I was going to go out into the middle of a Cajun parish in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana, and be by myself. And I looked at what was then Monsignor Dolan, rector of our seminary in Rome, and I was like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to be out of here. I can't do it. But I wouldn't be here today were it not for those years in seminary. And I've always had a passion to bring the theology and philosophy I've learned there and combine it with the psychological. I left seminary and I was really only trained to do a couple of things well: clean toilets and speak and read dead languages, namely Latin and Greek, which was awesome. But that didn't make me a lot of money. So I got the job that most of us who leave seminary do. I went and taught in a Catholic school. I had all this theology. Those of you who have ever worked with immediately recovering seminarians in Catholic schools, you'll know it. I had all the theology and I thought I could teach. I walked into that room and it hurt bad. Oh, it hurt bad. I had a lot of information that they didn't want. So I spent some time, and they didn't really like, nor did they like me. So I did that. I wore a whole bunch of hats for about 13 years while I was in Catholic schools. And I wanted to do one-on-one, so I went back and I got my training to be a psychotherapist. So I was a campus minister, blah, 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 school counselor, and now I work in private practice only with adolescents. 80% of the speaking I do is in Catholic schools to parents, teachers, and students. But when I'm not doing that, most of the time, yeah, Big Bald Spirit Club, that's it. I'm working with teenagers in my practice. So today, I know it's been a little bit of a slow start, but it's about to be like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. I know you've already drank a lot of water. So you're going to be able to get everything. Those of you who are type A, I know you're going to write, knock yourself out, but you can get everything. Videos, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of free stuff at the end. But just hang in there. So before we get to that, what's tough for you in terms of mental health? These hurting teens today, what's tough for you in your role? Just let me hear it loudly. Who?
How far to push?
How far to push? Yes. We'll talk about that. What else? Who?
Students opening up.
Getting students to open up. Okay, fair enough.
Building trust.
Building trust with adolescents, whether we're a teacher or not, just that adult-teen gap. Yep. We're going to spend some time on parents because I know that that's in, but getting parents to recognize there's a problem. How many of us in the room are parents? Raise your hand. So good. We have an empathy bridge, right? Awesome. Back here. You were going to say parents too. Yeah. What else is tough?
Dealing with
Dealing with one's own mental health issues, yeah. And that's, I don't think Dr. Robert Wicks is here, but if you ever get a chance to listen to Bob Wicks talk, he does great. We are all in positions of experiencing secondary traumatic stress. Those kids with whom you work with, right, who go through, who are hurting, when you're exposed to that, when you hear about it, when you recognize it, you are now under secondary stress. Chronic secondary stress, which we're all under, leads to burnout. And so it can also affect our own mental health issues, of which I've been very public, suffer from anxiety and depression, and certainly that can get triggered. Yeah, great point. Yeah, over here. Yes, sir.
A student's fragility is being used to manipulate
Yeah.
the institution.
And so that's going to come up, and that's good, because that's really one of the main things I want to talk to you about today. So we've got this fragile kid, right, who's got a diagnosis now, right? And I'm not making light of that. I give those, right? Write them. So we got a kid who's got a diagnosis, let's say moderately depressed. This kid, how do I know if they're using the depression to get out of work, and I need to back off, or whether or not I need to push this kid, right? And so there's no formula for it, but we're going to talk about some principles that'll make it a little bit easier, hopefully for you. Yes, sister, I got to come to you.
Helping their classmates know how to be supportive.
Helping their classmates. So this is a whole talk. Again, I'll give you the slide deck on that too. How to help teens, right? Because a lot of these kids are getting killed. These little teen therapists, they're getting in there and I mean, it's tough enough for us. They get in there, right? Please don't, they get their hands tied. Don't tell anybody I'm about to tell you this. And now this kid has just been psychologically hijacked. And we got a mental health crisis on our hands with a perfectly normal kid who doesn't know how to swim, who just jumped in the middle of the ocean, right? Is that it? You're like, oh crap, I didn't mean all that, Roy, but okay, whatever. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Understanding real life consequences. We're going to talk about that. It's called failure. Yes. Yeah, having boundaries. How do I get to know the kid? And that's enough. That is something. Oh God, I'm going to hurt myself. Are you? All right. That's something. And Mike and I, the guy who was in here previously, we talked about that a lot because we're from the same town. We're very close friends. The educators, a lot of times the folks in the ministry community don't fully appreciate the unique boundaries that have to be present for educators. It's different, right? The youth minister who goes and be a campus minister in the school and thinks it's going to be a seamless, I was like, oh no, you're about to get hurt, boy. It's different, right? Different expectations. How close can I get while maintaining, because you got to be good cop and bad cop all the time, regardless of your role in education. One more, what else is tough? Yep, and that's it, yep. You and then her behind you. Helping youth after the fact. Like, how do we walk with them once they're already getting help or after they've suffered from something, trauma? Yeah. What? I saw another hand. Building resilience. Yeah, you got all the major themes. Good. Let's get cracking. Oh, sorry about that. Y'all ready? Here we go. All right. So the paradigm where the Holy Father has invited us, right, to accompany young people. What does that mean? Accompaniment for me, it's one of these nice ministry buzzwords that at the end of the day can feel like nailing jello to a tree and mean absolutely nothing in the tangible reality. It means three things for me: understand, reach, and influence. Those are purposefully and without question sequential. You cannot do the last one until you do the first one. As Catholics, we have notoriously tried to jump to 3 without going through 1 and 2. It happens every Sunday and homily after homily, and I hear some really good, the best ones, I guarantee you, the best speakers, the best books, the best presentations you've read are people who have done number 1 and number 2. They know what you're going through. They understand what's happening. If you don't understand what's happening in the lives of teens, do you feel like you can influence them? Right? You might understand, but if you can't connect with that kid, if you can't get that kid to open up, can you influence them? No. So essential, we try to influence. So, we already did that. So our goals today: clarify our roles, learn some skills, understand, connect, and influence. All right. So accompaniment is not therapy. Amen? We're not training you to be therapists unless you already one, and I'm not training. It's not fixing. We love to fix. Our personality disposition profile that gets us into this work typically necessitates that we kind of like to fix, but we're not fixing. It's not social work, and it is not simple, nor is it easy. So the cultural landscape. Let me set up a couple things. Are you guys hanging with me? You doing okay? All right, good. All right. Hey, we still got a lot more time left. Good, yay. All right, so this is important, right? This is important. I want to set you up with the image of understanding, because a lot of folks right now are like, right, seriously, dude, are these kids as stressed out as the media is making them out to be? Yes. We've got the metadata. We've got the meta-analysis. We know, yes, we are experiencing more mental health problems today. It's not just that we know more about it and that the media, we've got the metadata to support it. So to understand it, though, I want you to understand like a bucket that we're pouring water. All right, so this cup is like 3/4 of the way full. These things that we're going to talk about are things that fill up that bucket. And so the stressor comes along. You following me? The stressor comes along, and this is when the doo-doo hits the fan. And so what I'm trying to help you understand is that little spurt thing that I poured, a lot of folks are like, that can't cause that. What I'm here trying to tell you is that there's a whole bunch of things that have already filled this bucket up. We're not starting from here with a lot of these young people, and this is an important one. We do not live in a world, I know this is esoteric and philosophical, but hang with me. For those of you who are existential, you'll like it. We do not live in a world that coheres anymore. I grew up in the early 1970s, in the remnant decade was the last few years when I was a kid, when the cosmic egg had already cracked in the 60s, but I still grew up in a world of wonder. We looked at the world. We were not nearly as cynical. We weren't nearly as jaded. And for the most part, this country in America revolved around the Judeo-Christian ethic. We all cohered, just like that bike tire, those spokes, we all cohered around the Judeo-Christian ethic, which meant that when life happened and I got a flat tire, because I'm adhering to something in the center with everyone else, my whole world doesn't have to fall apart. Today's world no longer coheres around the Judeo-Christian ethic. Amen? Is that fair to say? Yeah. I mean, in some places, I know we still respect Wednesday nights. We still respect Sundays. You cannot buy a car in Louisiana on Sunday. It is against the law. But you can drive through and get a daiquiri and drink it on your way. It doesn't cohere. And so what we have today, these young people and their parents are growing up in an adherent world, which is like on the monkey bars, right? When that bar goes away, what happens to them? They fall and it hurts. So that's what we see happening, the breakups. Some of these things are enough on their own to push mentally healthy and emotionally healthy kids over the board. But we've got a lot of things that really aren't, that because our world doesn't cohere, that's important. And I will also talk about how we can help their world to cohere in the things we do. So just by the numbers, let's look at some of the stats to understand young people in our care. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys experience sexual assault. About 34% this is low, 46%, this is an average number, 46% of Black American youth live in single-parent homes, which is a risk factor. 66% of Hispanic American youth live in single-parent homes, and an even higher percentage for those of you who work with First Nation or Native American youth live in single-parent homes. That's a risk factor. As a kid who grew up in a single home, my passion for this topic is not academic. My passion for this topic is personal. I had a single mom. My dad had an affair with my mother, lived in another part of Louisiana. Told her, hey, look, I got another family, can't have anything to do with you. My mom had to wear both hats. Mom, and I know we have some single parents in here. It's a tough job. She wore both hats, did a phenomenal job, but it is a risk factor. 1 in 4 young people in our schools have anxiety. For those of you in more achievement-oriented schools, those young people who are in AP classes, who tend to be in honors courses, you can guarantee that number goes to 1 in 3, sometimes 1 in 2. An increasing number of grandparents are raising and being the primary caregivers of grandchildren. When we do parent sessions, I see more and more grandparents who aren't coming just for trivia data. They're coming because they want to know more about how to raise their grandkids. The average family spends more than 9 hours a day on screens individually and less than 2 hours a day in face-to-face communication, which we'll talk. That's important because as a culture, not just young people, but also their parents are becoming very proficient technologically, but the amount of time that we're interacting interpersonally is going down. That's having mental health consequences. Fair enough? Because, as we'll talk about, anxiety is taking ambiguous data and drawing from ambiguous data the worst possible conclusion. Young people are in school all day face-to-face with ambiguous data. They do not, as a whole, accurately assess, interpret the facial and nonverbal gestures and expressions of their peers. They're getting worse and worse at it, and it's one of the things that's causing their anxiety to go up. We have a lot of folks who are together, but they're together alone. A lot of young people are doing this. Oh, I'm getting together with my friends. What are y'all doing? We're all here. We're really alone. Just like me and my family. We'll all be on 2 screens. We'll have one screen going that we'll share, and then every once in a while, we'll all be on our own thing, me whipping my wife's butt in Words with Friends or something along those lines, right? We're together, but we're really alone. The average couple, less than 10 minutes a day in uninterrupted communication. The average dad spends less than 7 minutes a day talking with his kids. This is a unicorn. You know, dad goes off, works for 50 years for the Golden Watch while mom stays home, makes home, right? Has the apron, waits for the milkman to deliver glass jars of milk in the afternoon. The kids get off the bus to Nestle Toll House cookies. That doesn't exist anymore, hardly. And where it does, it's great, but this isn't the family. I get it, we always want to hold up the ideal, but this is not our experience of family for many young people. It just doesn't look like that anymore. Almost the majority of moms now work, whereas that wasn't true 30 years ago. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's what it is. Divorce rate still hovering around that percentage. Of the families who experience divorce, 67% of them were in blended families. This is a pain train for a lot of these folks who are in our schools, by the way. What if we had someone come and talk and do a little presentation, get the local counselor to come in? You want to get parents in? I know they don't want to come to meetings because there's no perceived value for them. Yeah, we pull them in on the love of their kid. Now that's a lot. We can pull them in on that. But if I were your marketing director as a school and you were a corporation, I wouldn't count on that to keep the bottom line, right? I would if I were your marketing director, where are they hurting? Where are they hurting? What problems can we help them solve? Where they're hurting is their kids won't talk to them and they want to talk. Have a workshop on that, they'll come, right? They're hurting in blended families. They're hurting in single parents, right? They're hurting in communicating. Folks will come, right? So we got about 500,000 young people in foster care, praise God, also a risk factor. About 3 million young people live in adopted homes, awesome, but also a risk factor. About 500,000 young people, and this number just keeps going up, live in homes where there's a same-sex relationship. Well, no. Almost 2 million young people live in homes where there's a same-sex relationship. About 325,000 young people live in homes where there's a same-sex marriage. That number's growing because of the legalization of it. Here's my point on that. We don't have the longitudinal long-term research to show and draw any conclusions from that. For a lot of young people I work with, this is great. For some, it's embarrassing. I just put it as a risk factor. And I know that might offend some folks. It's just, this is a risk factor in South Louisiana. Maybe not in San Francisco, but in South Louisiana, that's a risk factor for a kid in our school. I mean, we still have people in South Louisiana who believe it's a mortal sin for a white man to marry a black woman. Like, I'm just saying, like, woo! Anyway, moving on. Wow. I love getting out of Louisiana. About 13% of the young people in our schools identify on the LGBTQ spectrum. Suicide is currently the second leading cause of death. Talking about suicide actually helps. If you haven't had anyone or do something, I know you guys do your own suicide prevention training, but teens want to talk about it. You know that. Natives and white Americans have the highest rates of suicide in the continental United States. About 27,000 kids in our country, about 27,000 families, which is probably closer to about 100,000 young people lost their parents this year to deportation. That affects us. So in the last 10 years, anxiety. You guys tracking? We're here? All right, so anxiety in 1 in 10, and in 2016, 1 in 5. Today, we think it's closer to 1 in 4. 1 in 8 teenagers will experience a major depressive episode, which can be diagnosed as depression while they're in high school. Mr. P, if you only knew how dark it is in here. I can't remember the last time I could see any light or that I felt happy. That's a 13-year-old. That's depression. Only 1 in 5 young people get help. Now, what are the reasons for that? One of them is that they don't ask for help a lot of times, right? But another one is that we don't recognize the warning signs and we don't have the skills to effectively intervene. What was the word I just said? Effectively. Have you guys seen interventions go south? I did. School counselor, when I thought it was a great idea to bring everybody in the room to talk about the bullying. Oh my God, thank God we didn't get sued. I mean, the damage control that I had to do. I mean, we can intervene, but we want to be able to effectively intervene, right? 1 in 4 cut, carve, burn, hurt themselves in order to make themselves feel better. This is 98.4% of the time non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. Almost nobody cuts as an act of suicide. They're cutting in order to activate the anterior cingulate cortex pain regulation center in the brain that cannot differentiate between emotional and physical pain. So when they cut, the naturally occurring opiates that the brain sends out to suppress that pain not only heals the physical pain, but it also eases and soothes the emotional pain as well. It's the feedback loop is what we call that in addiction circles, is very fast. It's addictive. We call it compulsive, but it's very addictive. Not every kid will do it, though. It gets really hot and my chest tightens, and I know if I could just get to the bathroom and cut, I'll feel better. 10th grade, 10-year-old. What am I supposed to do if we don't let them drop the class? They'll say that's why that kid keeps cutting. But if we let them drop it, aren't we enabling them to continue overcommitting? Thank you, high school counselor. 70% of our young people are sleep deprived. That statistic, I guarantee you, goes up in those honors and AP classes. Eating disorders, 1 in 4 teen girls. So why are kids more stressed today? I'm going to go through this real quick because I want to spend the rest of our time on the solution. Terror and violence. They know about it. Like it's on their conscious radar. Mr. P, can you honestly tell me as you look out at this world today that it doesn't scare the hell out of you? Why would I want to stay around for that? The political climate. Jesus, this slide stresses me out. I had an 11-year-old have panic attacks because her mother and father thought it was a good idea to make her watch all the presidential debates. Here's your sign. Relationships. More than 50% of young people self-report in 3 different surveys and studies I've read that they are in unhealthy and abusive relationships. When you're 16, sharing your passwords to all your social media accounts and sharing your geolocation with a significant other feels like intimacy. When you're 46 and that happens on the second week, we call it stalking. And unhealthy behavior, right? Uncertain future. I know that our kids are experiencing unprecedented amounts of stress and anxiety. I just don't see a solution to the problem. I mean, Roy, our job is to prepare them and get them into a good school, right? Undefined success. Undefined success. We've got a lot of young people and their parents who are chasing after a very secular definition of success that is not informed practically or theoretically by the gospel of Jesus Christ. What does that look like? Kid comes in my office and the parent. I'll have them both. B- in geometry, sophomore in high school. This kid's throwing panic attacks in my office, like couldn't regulate him from school, getting it down there. And so I do something, and I recommend it, and you can Google more about it, called anxiety mapping. This would be more for school counselors if you've got 10 minutes, right? But put it on the board, okay, B- in geometry, what does that mean? Well, then my GPA is going to go down. Okay, write that. The writing is important because they've got to see it. For anxiety and depression, all these things like nailing Jell-O to a tree, it's not Jell-O when you write it down. It becomes very real and very practical, and therefore it works. And then they start realizing the delusion, right? Oh, my GPA is going to go down. 1 test? Okay, GPA. Then what happens? Well, then I'm probably not going to do well on my standardized tests. Okay, well, then what's going to happen? Well, then I won't get into a good school. Then I won't get into a good school, and if I don't get into a good school, I'm not going to get a good job. And if I don't get into a good school and I don't get a good job, then I'm not going to make enough money. Write that on the board. And if I don't make enough money, I'm probably not going to be happy. There's the linchpin. There's the linchpin, right? I've had billionaires sit on my couch who are just a little bitty millimeter from taking their lives. All the money in the world. What profit a man What profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? My brothers and sisters, my wife teaches in a public school. She cannot share that message. We can. We can. Now, does that have consequences? Of course it has consequences. But if you got into this job for no risk, might I recommend a career change? Right? Undefined success. Right? And then, if I don't make it, then I'll probably fall in with the wrong group of people, get into drugs, and I'll be dead in a dark alley with a needle in my arm 2 weeks before anyone finds me. The parent and the kid it always ends up with a needle in the arm. I don't know why. It does. And then I get to go back to the beginning of the board and go, boo, in Cajun. I was like, it's a B- in geometry. Like, seriously, look at it. But anxiety, especially anxiety, typically fast processors, it tends to affect fast processors, connects those dots really, really fast. We have an opportunity to inform, because if we don't, then in good conscience, we're going to prepare these young people to end up just like Thomas Merton said. A man will spend his whole life climbing a ladder only to find out that it's up against the wrong wall. One of our primary jobs as Catholic educators, my brothers, the greatest gift I got in Catholic education from the Sisters of Mercy, the Christian Brothers, the Benedictine monks, the Marists, all the different, from 30 years of Catholic education, the best two gifts that I got, one is that I learned how to think. But the second one is they taught me what was capable of holding my love, what was worthy of loving, what can hold your love. And that is causing epidemic levels of disillusionment and enchantment in young people today. And we're hearing it from the millennials, like the whole college debt thing. Like we thought we were there. We had this whole promise, and but I'm so disillusioned because it's not there. I really thought that this could hold my love, but it can't. It can't. Money cannot hold your love. Secular success can't. Here's where we go with that. Here's the takeaway. Success by most of our folks are being defined as one, achievement. Our contribution, you're already doing it. Turn the dial up on it. Lean into it. Contribution and achievement. Both are important. If you try to sell an adolescent boy on contribution only and no achievement, you're going to lose that kid. Right? Just development, not just the boy, but the girl too. They've got to build it. They've got to achieve. But while they're achieving, we have to let them know that that's not going to take them the whole way. They're going to have to take a detour, and that is through service. So undefined success, lack of failure. And you see it. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I just want to affirm you so that you can go back to your schools and say, this big bald Cajun got up there and told me that you need to freaking let your kid fail, right? Huge, right? How do we know when to push a kid to face their fear or when to allow them some slack? It feels like a double-edged sword. Mandatory reading for all educators and parents, in my opinion. The Gift of Failure by Jessica Lahey. Or you can save yourself some time and listen to the 30-minute podcast that her and I did. It covers all the big points. But good stuff. She's awesome. The Gift of Failure. Parental issues. I guess I'm just worried because my mom's having an affair, and I found out about it because I read her phone and she doesn't know. Make sure you check your passcodes, folks. Genetics. 200,000 kids a year miss school because of, 200,000 kids a day in America miss school because of bullying. You said it, less resilient to traditional stressors. Now, they're more resilient to stressors that we wouldn't even be able to handle, right? I know it's hot. Healthy relationship, attachment issues. That mom or that dad needs to be looking at that baby and I. Especially for those who work with the young ones, we're seeing more and more attachment issues. Thank you, technology. Less play. I know we take what we do seriously. I get it. But man, wow. Especially for those of you who are in middle school and the young ones. Like, I'll get home next week and I'll go check my third grader out. I'll check Ben out. And like the secretary's going to look at me like I sprouted a beanstalk out of my neck. Like, where are y'all going? I think we're going to go to the movies. Well, Mr. Roy, I don't know what else we might do. We might go get some candy, some ice cream. No, what are y'all going to do? I don't know. Shots of brown liquor, field dress of cat. Miss Sue, I'm really not sure what we're going to do. She's like, you're really going to check him out? And I was like, he's in third grade. I don't think we're going to miss quantum physics. I think it's going to be okay, right? Look at how funny you did not find that. That is a problem. I mean, like, I know what we do is important, but play, like, if you haven't read some of the research on play, like, these kids need unstructured play. Now, the problem is they will always default to technology when available. They will always default to technology when available, so we want to get, but they still need it. Just because I will default to technology if I'm not careful, right? Insufficient resources, you know that, they're busy. I just can't put another thing on my plate, it's overwhelming. It's all good, but they're stressing me out. They're overcommitted. I suspect we should limit the number of commitments our students take on, this principal told me, but if we don't give them the opportunities that other schools do, we'll be out of business. Unaffiliated, social media. I don't think we realize how much it's affecting our moods and personalities. It's a tool, but it's become this thing that we can't live without. It's making us crazy. Amen. All right. Glad you're here. You did not miss the boat. All right, so let's just talk a little bit. I promised some of you who couldn't get into the adolescent brain workshop that we just talk a little bit about that because it's fun. This is important too. But why, Roy? Teens today want to know more about how their brain works. It's an in. Psychology, it's amazing, especially religious people. Like, our goal is to get in the house, but it's amazing how many of us get caught up in that we got to go through the front door. I make a living in therapy because all the therapists think they got to go through the front door. We got to go in, we got to talk about the marijuana, we got to talk about the problem. No, your goal is to get in the house. I don't give a damn how I get in the house. I'll crawl under and drill a hole in the floor if I have to. I'll go through the roof. My goal is to get in the house. We can talk about anything going into it, right? It doesn't really matter, but we get really caught up on it's got to be, we got to do it exactly like this. Our goal is to influence the kid. How that happens is going to be different. So adolescents grow. How do they grow? Not like this. They grow like that. And actually, not like that. We all grow like that. It's more like this, right? Now, this is important. I know you know this already, but this is what happens in each one of these little loops. It's the Paschal Mystery. Mastery, we all experience it. As adults, we will all go through this in our life about every 7 years. Adolescents will go through this about every 2 to 3 years. Can you imagine how complicated it gets in a family when everyone's cycling at different times? And I'm talking about metaphysical cycling. So mastery, it's great. For those of you who are married, you got married, that's honeymoon, great. That's all good. And then kids come along. Boom, death, disintegration. You'll never sleep again. You'll never have sex again. That's what it feels like. And that's a signal, I need new skills. I need people to come in and help. That's often where we can be most influential in the lives of young people and in people in general. That's what Jesus came for. I came for people who are doing here, that they may have life. I did not come for the well and then resurrection. So they're cycling. They do let us talk with them about their brain. Here's important. Neurons that fire together will wire together. So if they're firing together technologically, then they're going to wire together technologically, and those neural pathways are just going to get myelinated. They're just going to get formed, entrenched. And the longer that happens, the less proficient, the more proficient they're going to get technologically, which is fine, but the less proficient they're getting interpersonally, and that's causing some emotional problems. Simply with the adolescent brain, just real simply, that thing at the top is not there. It's just not there. Like, if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out, like, you should. Like, it goes in, like, around 10, the brain changes. A lot of stuff happens around 10. It metacognates. That's when the drama starts. It can start thinking about how it thinks. It can think about how we feel. We can think about how other people think and feel, and therefore we have all the drama in middle school, right? And then it flushes all those neural connections, all the stuff that it hasn't used. It flushes it, right? And so the prefrontal cortex is under construction. Now, that's important because the prefrontal cortex, it's not just the cockpit. I know we've heard about that for years. But one of the things, especially with adolescents, the unique role of the prefrontal cortex is that it's a filter. It's a filter. It takes the input, right, and it filters it and protects this big, bad reptile thing, big snake, anaconda thing at the bottom, the amygdala. One of the oldest parts of the brain that's basically just pure emotion that wants to pump out emotion. So, Jade is over here, and she's looking at Holly. Holly thinks Jade's looking at her, but Jade's looking at her like this, right? And Holly thinks that Jade thinks that she is a big B, and that now her brain is gone. She's going to tell everyone in school. She's going to go post stuff on social media. Like, Jade might just have gas, but seriously. But Holly doesn't have a prefrontal cortex to filter that, right? We know this. We put an adult and a teen next to each other. We've done it many times, right? Done the fMRI scans. A neutral expression, same facial expression. The teen looks at it, the adult looks at it. The teen, the amygdala, the limbic system lights up. The adult, the prefrontal cortex lights up. The teen perceives a neutral expression as a threat, whereas the adult can filter it out. So that's what's happening and their brain is under construction. I have a glitter, I highly recommend it. Get a jar of water and glitter and tape that thing up, right? And when the teens come in my office, I'm like, I shake it up. Like, this is your brain. This is your brain. Why would you try and make a big decision right now? This is your brain. Like, keep shaking it like it's bad. Like, let's see how long it takes to calm it down. So that's important. So trauma in the young brain, more than PTSD. One of the things we now know is that we've got lots and lots of undiagnosed trauma and unrealized trauma in the lives of young people. Now, it's a neurophysiological response to a disturbing or distressing experience. Now, it always has, y'all following me? I know this is like heady stuff. So trauma's got the objective event, like this is bad. Hurricane takes my house away. That's bad, right? Now, trauma also has the subjective event, meaning how am I and what's happening in me while that event's happening? Am I in a really good place? Do I have lots of good neural pathways formed? Do I have some good attachment when I was a kid? Do I have good support around me? This thing happens to me. It might not completely traumatize me, but you've got kid X standing next to me whose story is a little bit different, and it could completely wreck their world. So you've got two things happening in trauma. Understand where we started. Why are kids more susceptible? We're all more susceptible to trauma. Our world doesn't cohere. When our world cohered, we had the fabric, it was just more tightly knit, right? It held us. It was a container that held us. We felt it was something that held us. Now there's nothing to hold us. So a distressing experience. So what happens in trauma? Cuts off blood flow to major important areas of the brain, especially language. If you ever talk with someone who's undergone a trauma, within a week, they probably cannot tell you in any coherent way the narrative of what happened. Because the language, we have to have language in order to code experience, in order to have it. We also have to have it in order to be able to describe it, right? And so it cuts off language areas. That's important because the main skill that I want you to leave with, which is triage listening, actually will help that. The cortisol system gets derailed, either too much or not enough. We see this when kids are having a reaction on a scale of 1 to 10 out of 9 to something that might be a 1 or a 2. That's usually a trauma trigger. So it impairs language, fight, flight, narrows focus and alternatives. By the way, I am seeing more and more young people, and I'm wondering if you are too, who's gaming. It's not all gaming, but some of it activates that fight flight, and they stay in chronic levels of fight flight, and they actually present with trauma symptoms. These kids who have to go to treatment because they have gaming addiction and internet addiction often have to detox from that. So creates blah, blah, blah. All right, I already said that. Sorry, that was repeat. So here's where our role comes in. This is exciting. Here's my favorite definition of trauma. Going through a disturbing or distressing event without an empathic observer. What I'm here to tell you today, my brothers and sisters, one of the things that we now know in psychology is that when two people who have the same filters, right, go through an experience, if person A has someone who may not know exactly what it's like to go through that, but who's with them in it, their experience will be exponentially better than the person who really doesn't have anyone walking with them. What does that mean? That means that 98% of what I do, and I get paid very well to do what I do with adolescents, is be an empathic observer to their pain. They very often don't need me to fix it. For those of you who have any sort of contemplative dimension in your prayer life, you probably know this. At the end of the day, more than what we want, more than anything. And look, I've undergone some incredibly painful stuff in my life. And as much at the time I thought I wanted God to fix it, that is what I want. I mean, no one wants to hurt, right? Pain, pleasure. But what I really wanted to know was that I wasn't alone. What I really wanted to know was that God gave a damn about what was happening, right? It was like the kid who came into my office in 2007. He has this accent, this real like New York accent, which meant that he was like in Sicily. Sounded like he was from the Bronx or New York, but he's from this part of New Orleans called Chalmette that was destroyed. And I'm about 2 hours west of New Orleans in Lafayette after Hurricane Katrina, and this kid's in my office. He's clearly not from my town. And I'm like, dude, so tell me about Katrina, you know, tell me about it. And he goes, seriously, dude, my parents are paying you good money for me to come in here and tell you about Storm? I was like, no, what was your experience of Katrina? He goes, my mom called. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she's screaming on the phone, Eric! She goes, the storm turned. They were thinking that it was going to go more to Alabama, and it turned. It's going to take a jog to the west, and it could be a direct hit on New Orleans. She said, pack whatever you want to keep for the rest of your life. Go in your room. There's 6 of us. We got to fit in a minivan. Pack whatever you want to keep for the rest of your life. Put it in a 13-gallon trash bag, and we'll be there to pick you up in 2 hours. Someone told you you had 2 hours to put whatever you wanted to keep for the rest of your life in a 13-gallon trash bag. You think that would tell you something important about that person? This kid was suspended. He came to see me because he was suspended from a Catholic school because he was a senior. And the tradition was at the weekly school liturgies, the seniors would stand up and they would sing the school's alma mater. And it was beautiful. He was suspended because for months and months, he was in the front row and he refused to stand up and sing the alma mater. And so he saw another counselor. No one could get through to him. He comes in and sits down and we're talking. And I say to him, what was in your bag? And this kid who's an MMA fighter today, the tears just start trickling down his eyes. And he said, my dad's high school diploma. What school did your dad go to? Holy Cross High School in New Orleans. Holy Cross is just hundreds of years. It's like Harvard on the Bayou down there in New Orleans. It's gorgeous. Awesome. Well, what else was in your bag? My grandfather's senioring. What school did your grandfather go to? Holy Cross High School in New Orleans. All boys school. What else was in your bag? My great-grandfather's state championship football. What school did your great-grandfather go to? Holy Cross High School in New Orleans. Come to find out, his great-great-grandfather had gone to the school. All his uncles on his mom's side had gone to the school. And I looked at him and I said, Eric, what you're telling me is that you're about to be the first male Alfonso in 5 generations of men in your family and your mom's family to not graduate from Holy Cross High School. And he just starts bawling. And he's like, and those at that school, where I was campus minister at, by the way, expect me to stand up and sing my love of their tradition. He says, it's 25 years old. That's not a tradition. And I was like, I don't blame you. And he goes, here's what I don't understand. He goes, and he's looking up at the crucifix on my wall, and he goes, I know that God didn't cause this, but he could have stopped it. Why the hell would he allow this thing to happen? And I answered that in the only way we can, which is 3 words. I don't know. That's an emotional question that will not suffice with an intellectual answer. The only way we can answer that is in the context of relationship. Young people are constantly asking that question. Why would a good God allow this to happen? If God didn't want my friend to be born gay, then why was my friend born gay? If God doesn't want my friend to get married and he's gay, why would God allow that to happen? Why would God allow my parents to have a divorce, right? I was like, Eric, I can't, but I can walk with you while we seek an answer. And then he looked at me and he said, I guess what I really want to know was that God really cared and that he was watching and that he cared. And that's what we really want. That's the incarnation, friends. We get to be that for kids. So when we care, when we care, and look, this is simple, folks. I know you teach math, physics, science. I know you don't have time. I get it, you coach. I get it, you're an administrator. It's as simple as this. I'm walking down the hall, and the kid's got an expression that lets me know, because I'm paying attention, that they're not having a good day. Follow me. This takes less than 30 seconds. Hey, how's it going? Fine. I know the kid's not fine. The kid knows that I know the kid's not fine. The kid knows, I know they don't want an awkward, vulnerable counseling session in the middle of the mall in school with 1,000 people watching. So I'm not going to blow it. But I've got to do two things here. One, I got to let this kid save face, but I've also got to let him know that I see you. And I can do that very simply by going like this. Okay, all right. Okay. Something. I don't need to make it just real quick by letting them know like, okay, all right. I'm not buying it, but okay. I mean, you might say that. There's any number of things you can do that just lets that kid know that you touched it. You are now an empathic observer. That takes seconds. I've had kids come into my office over the last 20 years and tell me time and time again how teachers, youth ministers, and people just miss it. And the only reason I tell you that isn't to make us feel bad. I want you to know how important it is. Here's why that's important. Most of the effective stuff that we do, and I get it, there's plenty of other sessions on that, but this stuff, which is real important, the way our kids are hurting today, it's nailing Jell-O to a tree. It's really tough to measure it. And one of the things that's really tough to measure is what I'm doing effective? Am I doing the right thing? I might not know for 20 years until that kid's prefrontal cortex grows and they send me a thank you note. I sure as hell ain't counting. Right? Right, so when I do that, the kid's not texting me, you know what, I just want to let you know you really allowed me to save face there. And I wasn't ready for the vulnerability. I mean, I like Brene Brown, but I really wasn't ready to do that whole thing. I just want to let you know, great job. That's not going to happen. We'll go 20 years wondering if what I did made a difference. The big bald guy's here to let you know you make a difference. Those smiles, right, are so important. For those of you who came watch me run my yap in the middle of the exhibit hall yesterday, I was that kid. My mom worked 4 jobs to give me a Catholic education. She knew that if I went to the public schools, because it was so terrible in my hometown, that I would end up like all of her sister's kids. Of the 5, 3 are dead. They dropped out in 9th grade, got into drugs. The other 2 are brain damage. My mom, and none of them graduated. My mom was like, if you go to those schools, you won't. My mom also, like a lot of our parents, felt very insecure about passing on to the faith, and so she wanted to make sure I was in an environment, and I did. I was in that environment. She worked 4 jobs, and I was on scholarship. She was never home. I turned to food. I ate, and I ate, and I ate. I was unmercifully bullied. In 10th grade, my mom picks me up from school, thought we were going to the Chinese buffet because she normally worked till like 10 o'clock at night, so this was like a big surprise. She picks me up from school, and we go to this butcher shop, and I'm like, what are we doing here? And we walk in the back, and there's this big butcher, and he's standing there, and my mom says, we have to get an accurate weight on you. And I said, so why don't we go to the doctor's office? She says, baby, it only goes up to 350 pounds. I'm in 10th grade. She goes, you haven't been able to weigh on the doctor's scale since you were in 7th grade. And so at 16, I'm trying to wrap my mind around the fact that I weigh more than 350 pounds. But I'm thinking 351 because I'm an optimist, right? So I empty my pockets and take off my shoes because that's going to make a hell of a difference. And I step up on the scale, and at 16, I watch that needle spin to 454. I was unmercifully bullied. My last 2 years at Catholic school, I had some amazing Christian brothers, and there were some adults who reached out to me. Honestly, I felt like I was invisible. People stopped picking on me, but then I just felt like they were ignoring me. I felt like I had a 7X version of Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. And I remember thinking when I was a junior and senior in high school, I preferred it when people picked on me than when they ignored me. And I learned something powerful at 17, 18, that more than anything, we want to be seen. That's our deep, and we will get as big as we got to get, as loud, as quiet, as pierced, as inked, whatever. We will fly as many planes into as many buildings as we have to in order to be seen. Young people want an empathic observer. I wanted it. I graduated from high school at over 535 pounds. I wore a 7X shirt when I walked up. It's size 64-inch waist. I walked up to get my diploma. If you'd have said, tell me 3 things about yourself, I'd have said, I'm poor, I'm fat, and I'm stupid. Luckily, I flunked out of school, got a job working on a construction site with a bunch of people who probably hadn't darkened the door of a church since their baptism or christening. 7 months in, they fired me, collected $5,000 and told me, you don't belong here. You need to get your big butt back to college. These iron workers did. And I remember at 19 thinking, there's more in me than I could see. And I went, fell in with some folks at a Catholic student center who saw me, who just looked at me and treated me like I didn't weigh 535 pounds and my life changed. A Catholic priest, I had left the church, came back. It was a bunch of people doing a bunch of really small things. None of them took a degree. None of them took a license. They treated me like I was a decent human being, and my life just exploded. Within 3 years of encountering those people, I went and lost over 335 pounds without surgery. I had to have a $175,000 surgery that was done for free because it was the most advanced skin removal surgery that they had done in the country. It was like 4 square feet of skin. That's the power that we can make. Like, I didn't have surgery. Like, people saw me. They saw me. And you do that every day. You got to give the kid the F. No one's saying don't give them the F, but see the kid while you give them the F. Right? You're not doing them any favors giving them the D when they earn the F, right? We're not doing them any favors, or their parents. But see the kid. Be an empathic observer. So stress. So let's talk about stress real quick. We've got these kids who are incredibly stressed out, right? Stress is the feeling you get when you feel unable to ascertain, understand, or meet expectations. So that's okay. Stress is not bad. It can be good or bad. Most of what we're involved in is good stress, right? Now, too many good stressors can be a problem. And we want to handle that with young people on the front end. We want to really be encouraging our parents and our young people to think through. Like especially with these kids who are more concerning to us, these kids who are like wanting to take all the AP classes, like, can you really do it? Can you really do this and be mentally healthy? So good stressors is good. We want to encourage them, but we want to be careful about the overt bad stressors, right? Trauma, shame, unhealthy competition. So how do we know there's a problem? Changes in sleep, energy, obviously academic performance, rumors. Kids rarely spread rumors. I mean, they do, but I pay attention to them. I wouldn't completely discount them. There could be a problem. So what is anxiety? I already said it, already went over this. Worst possible conclusions from ambiguous data. I just can't take the pressure anymore. I can't be perfect, Mr. Roy. I just wish people would understand that. So anxiety. These are 3 things we want to do with a kid who's suffering from anxiety. What is known? What is real? They're not going to give you what is real. They're going to give you what they think is real. But is that real? We don't know that. What is known? What do I absolutely know? What's most important? The final one is the second thing I want you to take away, what is the specific next action? Anxious kids cannot discern what is the very next thing. The very next thing you need to do is get up out of the seat. The next thing you need to do is walk. So like, go get your book sack. Open up open up the laptop, open up, right? What's the next action? This is incredibly helpful to young people. I just keep picturing my mom and dad, 6th grade boy, killing me and roasting me over a spit. OCD. Now he's in 6th grade, right? I've had this when they're 16 and the parents are like, no, he's right, we were. Like, we were thinking about it. We had the schematics, but we never thought he'd see it. So depression. Oh, I love this. Only made a 35 on the ACT out of 36. My whole life I've dreamed of going to a school that almost nobody in the world statistically can get into. And now I feel hopeless. Okay. Depression, serious mental health problem, persistent feelings of sadness, almost 2 weeks. With teenagers, irritability is a very common symptom. So what do we want to do? Less is more. We want to listen. Listening changes the brain. Listening changes the brain. Listening pulls the brain out of fight flight. When a person feels heard, we've got research on this now. If I sit and listen to you and you want to come in, hey, I need to talk to you about something. If I really listen to you and you feel heard, it will light up parts of your brain that would only get lit up if you won the Powerball, which indicates 2 things: impressive, significant pleasure and surprise. Wasn't expecting it. People don't expect to be listened to. They expect to go through some formalities, assuming that there's good social skills, and then be moved on. They really don't expect to be heard. When they're heard, it changes the brain. I don't need to solve my clients' problems for them most of the time, because when they feel heard, it opens up all the cortisol levels start going down. Their myopia goes like this, and they can start seeing solutions. And so I can say, what are you seeing right now, right? We want to encourage exercise because stagnation is what depression loves. Isolation, depression loves isolation, so we want to encourage social and sobriety. Substances only make it worse. So those are the things we want to encourage real quick with depression. We want to be watched out, well, obviously suicide, but more and more research is showing with 3 things come together, the perfect storm for a suicide. Perceived burden, disenfranchisement or thwarted belonging. Like it could be as much as a breakup, or it could be as unobvious as the junior football player who was already talking to colleges about playing, who fractures his collarbone and won't play for the rest of the year, and he loses his starting spot. Thwarted belonging. We got an impulsive kid, we got a problem. These 3 things are there, we got a problem. This kid needs to be, we need to be letting the parents know. And I would say it just like that. Look, I don't know, but here are 3 things. And I would just, if I'm you, I would want to know. And again, there's ways to do it, obviously. So ask directly, are you thinking, have you thought about it? Try not to let them be alone. Obviously, in schools, it's simple because, no offense, school counselors, we can just punt it to you. And we're going to bring you in. And you should, obviously, bring in the school counselor. So suicide, girls, boys. Isn't it true, though? Right? All right. So what else helps? So why doesn't talking work? Talking can work, but boy, you better have listened really well and really for a long time if you're going to. The only reason you're listening to me right now, is because what I'm saying is true to your experience. And the only reason that's the case is because I've spent 75 days in the last year with you, knowing what your experiences are. So you feel heard. That's the only reason you're listening. People do not listen until they feel heard. They won't, right? So that's why talking won't work. I see this all the time with the medical models and doctors. And no offense, sometimes administrators. Well, why don't you just tell them? Oh, that's great. Hey, Wall, you know what? You really ought to cheer up. Buck up, Buttercup. I mean, okay, I told them. What was the word we mentioned earlier? Effective. It's amazing how much crap we do to make ourselves feel good, but that might not actually work. Right? I want to effectively, where talking doesn't work unless you have listened. Why? Because of human resistance. We're just resistant, and adolescents are especially resistant. 99% of our resources as a church have gone toward intellectual resistance, and that's not where most of the resistance is. Intellectual resistance is simple. It can be overcome with logic and a systematic thought process of that which is real. You can overcome intellectual resistance. Logic very often does not produce change, right? If we did, no one would text and drive. No one would overeat, and no one would smoke. If logic were enough to produce change, people would not do stupid stuff. But we all do stupid stuff. So what do we need? We need an emotionally compelling reason to change. And the emotionally compelling reason to change comes when I feel seen and when I feel heard. This is what Jesus did. And so if I'm listening to Fix with an adolescent or my wife, they're going to know it. Right? They're going to know it. You're listening. Don't fix it. It's true. People, no one, and this is the truth of it, write this down. No one wants someone else to be the expert on their life. I want as much help and insight about my life as you can get, but I need you to do it in a way that makes me feel like the expert. Otherwise, I'm not going to like you. And that's what happened in my marriage. I'm very intuitive. My wife's like, you know what's wrong before I do. She goes, would you let me figure it out on my own? I was like, okay, if you want to take all that time, but I'm telling you. You're feeling sad. I'll give you 10 minutes to figure it out. Okay. So to listen, to understand, and to heal. So to do that. So let's take stress avoidance, which is one of the obviously the big issue. How do we challenge it? Why do we want to challenge stress avoidance? The kid who skipped school before the test, the kid who doesn't want to take the test, because it leads to double loaded stress on the back end. I don't care how good of an excuse you got. If you're You are taking the avoidance pathway. The avoidance pathway leads to suicide. Really, big guy? Absolutely. Most of the depression that we clinicians see today is not depression originating out of depression. It's originating out of anxiety. It's exhausting being worried all the time. It overtaxes the sympathetic nervous system and then begins forming chemical changes in the brain. So anything that I can do to help that kid, right, manage their stress, and so facing the stressor head on early as opposed to picking it up later is going to be helpful, right? So momentary relief reinforces the even if it does work out for them, even if they've never done it before, it still reinforces the maladaptive neural pathway, which is the avoidance pathway. Avoiding feels good. Facing my responsibilities feels bad. Therefore, I feel good. So how do we do it? 4 steps. Show respect, normalize, empathize, validate. So it makes perfect sense to me. This is a form, and look, you can get all, it makes perfect sense to me that checking out seems like the best choice right now, but I wonder what consequences that might have. Feel, felt, found. That would be the 3rd thing to write down in your toolbox. I love it. I use it every day, 6 times a day. Wow, it seems to me like, as best I can tell, man, you're feeling really stressed out right now because you have this test next hour, right? Feeling really stressed out. You know what? Over the years, I've worked with a lot of young people who have felt the same way, like you're not alone. What I have found is that when they check out and when they skip and when they take the avoidance pathway, it only makes their anxiety and things worse on the back end. Better to face it now, right? So feel, felt, found. So show respect. So when we're challenging a kid, like to show respect, sometimes we can get caught up in drama and we can be very patronizing and condescending, and that's not helpful to young people. Check our own attitude. We want to avoid that. Normalize the behavior. Lots of teens go through this. I know what we want to do. What we want to do in that moment is say, buck up, buttercup. That won't be effective with most kids. It might be with some, but it won't be with most. Lots of teens go through this. You want to normalize it. Offer empathy. What's it like for you to know that you're not, I'm freaking out, I'm stressed, right? What's it like for you having to go on this retreat, not knowing anyone, or go on, or do this thing that you've never done before? A lot of social anxiety with teens today, that's not social anxiety. It's interpersonal skill anxiety. I don't know how to make small talk, and therefore I don't want to be in the social situation. That's different from classic social anxiety. Offer a mirror. So for you right now, is it kind of like, so when listening to young people, let them know that you're hearing them, what they're telling you. It makes it personal, specific, especially with young people. And by the way, folks, I know this isn't my workshop, but I do a lot on it. I would just have about 1/3 of my practice is young people who identify on the LGBTQ spectrum, right? Come from all over the country, some of them all over the world, because I'm Catholic, whatever. But it's fairly simple on some level when it comes to adolescence. Like, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed till 27. With some cases, we do know that kids very young have a handle, maybe there are more obvious things that are happening and showing with regard to their secondary sexual characteristics or their orientation, right? Whether it's their gender orientation. But for the vast majority of these teens, they are identity shopping, right? They're especially with the trend. And look, I'm so respectful. I love these kids. I love them. Like, they are but I'm telling you, like Brown University just wrote an article on it, a research study called Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria. That doesn't freaking exist. It's not rapid onset. This is what and that's okay. However, we still believe that there's probably about 0.6% of people who really do struggle with gender dysphoria. But the research shows that 9 out of 10 adolescents with sexual orientation who think they might have a same-sex attraction will outgrow that by the time they're 2 years out of high school. I don't have data on the transgender, but this is, I use this, so for you right now, is it kind of like, so for you right now, meaning it could be, it doesn't have to be, but it might be. Let's hold it gently. All I'm asking you to do is hold it gently. If it's still here in a few years after undergoing scrutiny, great, but let's just hold it gently, right? Tentative, it assumes my understanding may not be accurate. Very respectful. Validate, and then offer alternatives. I'm curious, what alternatives have you considered? And then give them some alternatives. Feel felt time. Sorry, the duplicate slides. Real quick on parents, and then what's happening with parents? They're scared to death of being embarrassed. Being a good parent is one of their highest values. Being liked and accepted is one of all of our highest values, whether we care to admit it or not. I'm not saying it's the highest. Fear of embarrassment, they're afraid of messing up their kid. Again, embarrassment. They're dizzy with cultural change. Dizzy. They're conflicting viewpoints and advice. For every big, bald speaker, you say one thing, you've got another one saying another. Which column to read? Disenchantment with God and the church, big time. Telling them not to be disenchanted, I think we've realized doesn't work. I think we were trying to manage the damage about 9 months ago. It's like, it's okay for you to be disenchanted. Now, let's start there. They're genuinely confused, poor modeling, they're busy. I'm trying to give you empathy. Why? Because if you try to go to parents without empathy, all you're going to get is the resistance. So when my wife showed up for First Communion a couple of years ago, and the audience is full, probably 70% Catholic school, but 70% of those people don't go to church every Sunday. Father steps up and says something that he thought was funny, right? He stood up and said, well, so glad y'all are here. This will probably be the last time I see you before confirmation, right? No one, see, this group laughs. That group, you could have heard a mouse pee on cotton. Nobody laughed. Nobody laughed. It was a little too on the nose, and it landed as patronizing and condescending. And then next week, 80% of those people weren't in church, right? So if I want to be, I get it. I know they're a pain in your ass. They're a pain in my ass. I'm a pain in your ass. I get it. We're all a pain in everyone's ass, right? I got it. But if we want to be effective, we can't do this. We've got to go to them. We get it. And I get it. You don't feel like it. I know they make more money than you. I get it. I get it. But if you want to be effective, if you want to be right, that's an ego need. Being right is an ego. Correct, truth, what is real, that's objective reality. Your need to have me assent to your interpretation of that reality is an ego need. You can be right or you can be effective, but you can't be both. Do we want to be effective? I want to help parents, not as much for helping them as much as I want to help the kids. And I've got to be able to help the parents to help the kids. Amen? So that doesn't work. What helps? The same thing that we did with the kids. What's it like for you? What are you struggling with? Validate. It makes perfect sense to me. I can't imagine what it's like to be a single parent raising 3 kids and putting them through Catholic school. So that's it. Well, I got more slides. Sorry, hang on. That I don't want to use. All right. I just want to get you to the end. All right. No questions. What happened? There was a lot of slides. You'll get them. It's all stuff I've talked about already. They were repetitious. So I just wanted to let you know about the podcast. We've got 100 episodes on today's Teenager Podcast of this content. It's for you. It's for Catholic educators, pastors, ministers. It's not just Catholic. It has a wider audience. It's free. I'll just leave it at that. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me there. I'm leaving here, and at 12 o'clock, the book, Helping Teens. Huh? My clicker's not working. Yeah, Roy at today'steenager.com or bigbaldSpeaker@gmail.com. That will also work. If you want the slides, I'll upload them, the whole deck to the thing. But if you want the free stuff I was mentioning, email me, and I will send you the ebooks and the online courses and stuff like that, the videos. Like, it's good stuff. Just telling you. It's good stuff. Love you. You're awesome. Thank you for what you do. God bless you. I will be at the Ave Maria booth from 12 to 12:30, signing if you guys want. I'll be there or to chat, and I'm going to hang out here too.
Thanks for throwing on the LGBTQ.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I am.